So we already discussed last time that Rabba's view with regards to Rav Yehuda was that he saw Rav Yehuda saw stumbling not just as negligence on the part of the person trying to remove the picture from the shoulder, and that basically Rabbi Meir said that even if it disintegrated with no stumbling, in that particular case, even more so, Abaya said that Rabbi Meir would find it, you'd have to be liable for it, even if there was no negligence. And then the Gemara said, but would you really? And then it talked about the pictures on the roof. And then we found, as opposed to Abaya, who says that Rabbi Yehuda would not find a person liable for stumbling, but Rabbi Meir would. Okay, so we discussed last time that seeming change. If I have got it wrong, I apologize to Rabbi and Abaya. It just seems like that from the way we've looked at it and looked at it again. I might be missing something, but I'm not sure. I can only go with the Schottenstein and some of the other shiurim. All right, that I've listened to that wasn't that specific. Abaya elaborates, in the case of damage inflicted at the time of the fall, they argue as to whether who stumbles is considered negligent. One master, the Tana Kabb, which is Rabbi Meir, maintains that one who stumbles is considered negligent, while the other master, Rabbi Yehuda, maintains that one who stumbles is not considered negligent. That's at the time of the fall. Now, we also did discuss that at the time of the fall, what does that mean, Gavin, exactly?
What, at the time of the fall?
Yeah, what does it also include?
Whether it's on the...
Now, what time period is the time of the fall also? Okay, I'll go for it.
Okay, so it also includes the time of the grace period after the fall. From the time you can get back and get it, say, go get something to clean it up, etc. Same with the wall.
Excellent.
And the courts give you that for like 5 days. If it falls in those 5 days, you're not responsible. If it falls after that, you are responsible.
Yeah, but there's no 5 days.
I'm talking about the wall. You didn't hear me. I said it's like the courts.
Reasonable amount of time.
A reasonable amount of time.
Okay, so you're saying it parallels the daf we did of the wall, where it's saying that it has to give a reasonable period of time to clean it up. Yeah. Just like if we see a wall leaning and we know that a wall is about to fall, where the base in gives the guy 5 days to get his wall fixed. So too in this particular case, the guy's allowed and entitled to a certain period of time, maybe a half an hour or an hour, to clean up the mess of the drop picture before he's held liable.
So, yeah, because it's Superman. Yeah, as you said, it's after shards are created within 1 second. You can't exactly. It's okay. Impossible.
Exactly. So that's exactly it, Kev. So we already discussed last time that Rabba's view with regards to Rav Yehuda was that he saw Rav Yehuda saw stumbling not just as negligence on the part of the person trying to remove the picture from the shoulder, and that basically Rabbi Meir said that even if it disintegrated with no stumbling, in that particular case, even more so, Abaya said that Rabbi Meir would find it, you'd have to be liable for it, even if there was no negligence. And then the Gemara said, but would you really? And then it talked about the pictures on the roof. And then we found, as opposed to Abaya, who says that Rabbi Yehuda would not find a person liable for stumbling, but Rabbi Meir would. Okay, so we discussed last time that seeming change. If I have got it wrong, I apologize to Rabbi and Abaya. It just seems like that from the way we've looked at it and looked at it again. I might be missing something, but I'm not sure. I can only go with the Schottenstein and some of the other shiurim. All right. That I've listened to that wasn't that specific. A buyer elaborates. In the case of damage inflicted at the time of the fall, they argue as to whether who stumbles is considered negligent. One master, the Tana Kabb, which is Rabbi Meir, maintains that one who stumbles is considered negligent, while the other master, Rabbi Yehuda, maintains that one who stumbles is not considered negligent. That's at the time of the fall. Now, we also did discuss that at the time of the fall, what does that mean, Gavin, exactly?
What at the time of the fall?
Yeah, what does it also include?
Whether it's on the...
Now, what time period is the time of the fall also? Okay, I'll go for it.
Okay, so it also includes the time of the grace period after the fall, from the time you can get back and get it, say, go get something to clean it up, etc. Same with the wall.
Excellent.
And the courts give you the like 5 days. If it falls within those 5 days, you're not responsible. If it falls after that, you are responsible.
Yeah, but there's no 5 days.
No, I'm talking about the wall. You didn't hear me. I said it's like the courts.
Reasonable amount of time.
A reasonable amount of time.
Okay, so you're saying it parallels the daf we did of the wall, where it's saying that it has to give a reasonable period of time to clean it up. Yeah. Just like if we see a wall leaning and we know that a wall is about to fall, where the base din gives the guy 5 days to get his wall fixed. So too in this particular case, the guy's allowed and entitled to a certain period of time, maybe a half an hour or an hour, to clean up the mess of the drop pitcher before he's held liable.
So, yeah, because it's Superman. Yeah, as you said, it's after the shards are created within 1 second, you can't exactly. It's impossible.
Exactly. So that's exactly it, Kev. What I'm saying is this here: you get from Food Lovers Market olive oil in a thin glass container. Okay, you drop it. It's not the glass container that you need, because the Coca-Cola bottles or glass containers are a dime a dozen. What do you need? You need the olive oil at 299 Rand that you bought it for. And that's the content that you wish you could take back, not the container. You're not in the business of collecting containers. Therefore, that argument with regards to the shards of glass or the shards of ceramic is of little value to you. And that's where the argument, Gavin, outplays about whether or not the shards are ownerless. It doesn't occur at the point where you spilt the liquid, because that liquid is precious to you. That's what the Gemara is saying. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. Yes,
so the argument itself can only play out based on realistically what you declare ownerless. Okay? So this is discussed by Rashi and Tosfot. You'll see it in note 12. In conclusion, the Mishnah is understood as follows. A person carrying a pitcher of water or olive oil or wine in the street stumbled. So the pitcher fell to the ground and broke, leaving a puddle of olive oil, wine, or water, and some shards. Okay? Then what happens is either one of these situations, or maybe both, occurred. So then at the time of the fall, in other words, before the owner, exactly as Arthur said, had a chance to remove the debris, someone slipped on the olive oil and suffered damage. Since the owner was unable to remove the water, the only basis for holding him liable would be what? Kevin, Gavin, Arthur? Do you understand the question, or must I repeat the question?
If he slipped on the water, maybe pour.
So what I'm saying is as follows. You've got precious liquid here. Let's call it olive oil because it's more slippery and it's worth more money. Now, you drop, this thing gets dropped. Exactly at the time that you drop it, a few seconds later, the gas slipped on it. Okay? Now, you haven't had a chance to clean up the debris yet. On what basis could you hold a person liable for that? It's a good question.
Yeah, it is a good question.
So
because he doesn't have enough time.
Correct. Correct. Any suggestions, guys? This is purely suggestions on your part before I give you the answer.
It's not negligence, not...
What of?
Negligence?
Exactly. Exactly. So the negligence in what regard?
And accidental negligence, I mean, not even.
No. They're two contrary terms. You can't have accidental negligence. They're two opposite sides of the coin. Something is either deemed an unavoidable mishap, in other words, an accident, or negligence. Both. They're opposite ends of the spectrum, but you're onto something, Arthur.
I was going to say bore, but you maybe not.
So, no, bore is the consequence. Bore is just the hazard. So, according to what Arthur is saying, the only point that you can hold somebody culpable is according to this argument with Rabbi Meir and Rav Yehuda, where it's saying, listen, was it negligent that the person, as he took the picture off his shoulder, Kev, was he negligent as far as that's concerned, or was it a case that he just slipped accidentally and it was an unavoidable mishap? So it's at that point that we say there's responsibility. Rabbi Meir says it doesn't matter, you should have looked where you were going, and therefore the fact that it's not like the picture disintegrated off your shoulder, because if the picture disintegrated shoulder, the Gemara came to prove that Rabbi and Abaya's assertion wasn't correct, and that even Rabbi Meir would deem that an unavoidable accident. Do you remember how? It was talking about the pictures in the roof on an abnormal wind left to dry.
Yeah.
So in other words, if it's a manufacturing default, even Rabbi Meir, the Gemara is holding that it doesn't necessarily agree with Rabbi and Abaya. That in that case, even Rabbi Meir wouldn't hold the person responsible. So let's discuss an issue where they all agree. It only agrees where, as he's taking it off his shoulder, he trips and falls. So Rabbi Meir in that case said the guy should have looked where he's going, and lack of focus in terms of what you're doing constitutes negligence. Rabbi Yehuda said, listen, nobody aims to trip. It was an accident, and therefore he's not liable. So that's where the basis of responsibility lies. Okay, all right, next thing. Then you've got a case of after the fall. In other words, once the owner had a chance to remove the debris. Someone then injured himself on the shards. So the owner has relinquished his ownership of the shards sometime before the accident. Why? Because the glass container that was holding the olive oil wasn't particularly of any value to him whatsoever. So in that case, the owner is liable only if the person can be held responsible for a hazard he left in the street and then subsequently declared it ownerless. Okay? So that has nothing to do with whether or not he was negligent in causing the object to fall in the ground in the first place. They're two different discussions. Does that make sense, Gav?
Yeah.
Okay. So it was saying, well, do you say that somebody that created a hazard in the public domain and declared it ownerless is responsible or not? Rabbi Meir said yes. Why does, okay, I'm going to ask you guys a question. Why does Rabbi Meir say that you are responsible? Where does he get it from in the Torah? We just covered it now.
What did you?
Firstly, I want to know the reason and where he gets it from. Rabbi Meir says, if with an ownerless object, why are you responsible? In other words,
he doesn't. He doesn't acknowledge ownerless property. He says that if it's left there, whether it's ownerless or not, you're liable.
Okay, and on what basis does he say that in the Torah? We just covered it.
What he's going according then, he's going according to Shmuel, isn't he? With Rabbi and Shmuel.
Yes,
so
he
Shmuel had that opinion as well. He said a pit is a pit, and you're liable no matter what.
Okay, yes, but where did I get it from? Very good. Very, very good. You hit that.
Because you can't be irresponsible and leave something in the public domain. I don't know what the source is, I have to be honest. I can't remember. So come back to me as soon as you say it.
So your logic is correct there, is that he would agree with Shmuel, and they both say you can't be responsible in the public domain. But the principle is where they get it from. So where do they get it from? Is that their understanding of the Torah's explanation of bor is when a hazard was created in the public domain. Okay? This is where you've got to be very clear. Whereas Rav Yehuda and many of the sages say, listen, the biblical derivative of where it was originated from with the bore is you created a swimming pool. Say you created an empty swimming pool, and then you ran out of money, okay? And then you have money left on the bond of your house, and you basically need to just sell the house and keep it open to the public because the municipality bought it over, whatever the case may be. Now the house belongs to the public, but you still maintain use of the pool for whatever reason, or maintain a use of that ditch that you created. Therefore, it's your property. And only if it's your property and it causes injuries because you've allowed your premises open to the public, are you responsible now? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So then there's an argument with Rav and Shmuel. Rav would say you then also responsible for utensils. Why? Why?
Because it's like shore. What's it?
Yes. And therefore?
So if it's like shore, then it's you liable for damages.
No, but why?
Why are you liable for damages?
Yes. For utensils.
Because with Kevin, you knew this well last week. You were talking about it.
Intention, maybe, or it's shore is like intention. The shore is intentionally damages.
No.
Not?
What we say.
So there were two things. The one is if it's shore, then it's there's two reasons. Either it's unusual. Am I in the right direction? Is that what you want to hear?
No.
Because I'm struggling. I can work out the other one. All right, so I'm in the wrong direction.
No. There's one simple. I know what you're referring to, but it's not here. There's one simple sentence. If you own a boar because it's your property, not a bull, boar. Sorry. If you own an ox, and it stands on a utensil, it's your property that caused damage. Therefore, you're responsible for your property causing damage. And therefore, if you haven't relinquished ownership of the hazard, it's as if your property damaged another person's utensil property. Then under the law of shore, which is ox, you are responsible if your property causes damage. If the pit is ownerless, then you're not responsible for utensils, even according to Rav and Shmuel, because bor is exempt for human death and utensil damage, except for Rav Yehuda, who says you're liable for utensils in a bor. Okay? So, that being the case, we know that Rav Yehuda gets this law of ownerless, where if you declare your hazard ownerless, it's not your responsibility, from the fact that he interprets in the Torah that you have a property and you've got a hazard, and you then give the property to the public, but you retain the swimming pool or the pit, and in that case you're responsible if you haven't declared it ownerless, because it's your pit that caused damage when you opened up your property to the public. That's the Torah verse that he extracts it from, and many of the sages. So now that you understand the reasoning, it's becoming a little bit more clear. All right, let's go on. Now, the Gemara challenges a biased explanation of the Mishnah. But since the Mishnah deals with these two issues, it can be assumed that the Brisa, which begins, if one's pitcher broke and he did not remove it, also deals with these two issues. What's it talking about here? Very simply, Mishnah has two issues. Is that at the time of the fall and after the fall. Okay? The Brisa that brings this issue of the pitcher that broke and the camel that fell must obviously deal with these two issues, because why would the great rabbis bring a Brisa that wasn't mirroring or paralleling to the two issues in the Mishnah? They don't bring a Brisa that only parallels one of the aspects. So now we're going to discuss the camel. And we're going to discuss the slight issue. So the case of the pitcher is in order. Why? Because you can be explaining it as occurring either at the time of the fall or after the fall. How do we know this? Picture. I'm walking with it, Kev, in my hand, and I'm taking it off my shoulder, and I stumble. Olive oil is in the floor. The glass and shards are there. Am I responsible because stumbling is negligence, or is it an unavoidable accident? Fine. The part of the Brisa discussing the picture reflects that argument between Ravi Meir and Rav Yehuda. After the fall, I've had sufficient time to clean it up, and I declared the shards of glass from the container or the ceramic ownerless because it has no value to me. I never bought the container. I don't buy a bottle of Coca-Cola for the glass container. I buy it for the Coke. I don't buy olive oil for the thin glass that surrounds the container. I buy it for the olive oil. Same thing with wine, a bottle of wine. Who buys it for the bottle? Gavin, who buys an expensive Dom Perignon for the bottle, and who buys it for the champagne?
I'll be honest, you're going to find this funny. I think it's there's a glass Coke bottle. And my kids came here a couple of times, and I've kept the bottles because they're amazing. You fill it up, and you're getting at least a liter or 1.25 liters of water a day. So a Coke bottle works well, but the others, it's bizarre though.
All right, in a Coke bottle, maybe it's a...
I got one here. Can you see it?
Yeah. A Coke bottle is a different...
I use this for water.
Can I go to the Gemara?
Yeah, sorry.
James, you just proved the point. He's got water inside the bottle. The water's valuable.
Yeah, no, sorry, I just go according to the truth, and I had to bring it up because truthfully, I am using a Coke bottle.
You just proved the point, as Arthur said. The reason you're using it is to contain the water of value, not the bottle.
Yeah.
No,
but Gavin's
I keep water inside. No.
But Gavin's proving the point is that the bottle has utility.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm using my own examples. Instead of just a pitcher with water, let's use a utility of water in the desert, which is precious, life-saving, where you can even hit somebody with a spade if they keep taking your water. So let's just talk about water at that value. Does that make sense? Or olive oil, that you're not buying it for the container, Gav, you're buying it for the olive oil. That's the primary.
Listen, 99% of the time, you're 100% correct.
Just
All
think
right, guys,
about this.
let's cover some ground.
Quickly, just think about this. Without the water, the container is useless.
Exactly. So, all right,
Absolutely.
guys, let's cover some ground. So what we're saying is the container that is of less value, because why is it of less value in those times? People made a picture from earth. So there was plenty of sand in the desert, believe me. They weren't running out of sand anytime soon. So all they did is they baked a container in the sand with a bit of liquid, and you could use seawater. The only fresh source of water in Israel is the Kinneret. So you can actually use ocean water and mud to create pitchers and containers. So believe me, the ocean wasn't going anywhere. The desert sand wasn't going anywhere. It wasn't of equal value. So the only definition I can use now is when you're having Dom Perignon or you're having olive oil that supersedes the value of the container, that when you lose that product, it's the olive oil you miss. It's that 400 Rand champagne you miss. It's not the container that's housing it. And therefore, after the time of dropping a container, you're declaring the container ownerless. And then the argument with Ravi Yehuda and Rav Meir reasserts itself. Ravi Meir says you're responsible. Ravi Yehuda said you declared it ownerless, you're not. So we can understand the first part of the brisa of this example of the pitcher covering the Mishnah. What we don't understand so far is how can the second part of the brisa, which is the case of a camel, posing a difficulty? Why? Because where so in other words, the camel's walking, it fell down, and on impact it died, either from exhaustion or the impact killed it, and now you've got a dead camel carcass there. So now we can see that that is a valid argument in terms of after the fall, that somebody can trip on the carcass of the camel, and therefore that could injure. So you need to either get the camel out of the way, or you have to declare the camel ownerless. And if it is declared ownerless because nobody wants a smelly carcass, in that particular case, the problem is is it a hazard after the fall? So what it's saying is the Bryce's example with the camel only explains responsibility of the argument with Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda after the fall. Can you see this, guys? Because at the time that the carcass collapses, it then becomes a public nuisance and hazard. And then does the owner declare the carcass ownerless, and is he responsible to remove it? Or once it's ownerless, if it injures somebody, is not responsible. But what we're saying is the case of the camel doesn't seem to cover the issue at the time of the fall. Why? Because what's the argument at the time of the fall? Is the owner responsible for having stumbled? Now, in this case, he never stumbled, the animal stumbled. Are you with me? The animal fell. What does this have to do with the person's responsibility?
Well, firstly, that the camel is not negligent. It's it's different to a person slipping. So there's no argument there.
That's the problem. That's what the Gemara says the problem is that it doesn't address the first issue at the time of the fall. That's the problem. And that in order for the brisa to be valid, we need it also to occur where the camel mimics the same as the pitcher. Responsibility at the time of the fall and responsibility after the fall. So let me go on now that you've chapped it, Gav. But how can it occur at the time of the fall? That's what the Gemara says. The Gemara answers, Rav Acha said, such a case occurs where the camel passed through water that was covering a path by the swollen banks of a river and it stumbled. So the sages in Rabbi Meir have a dispute regarding whether the owner is considered negligent for having led his camel along a path whose surface cannot be seen. Okay, so what it's saying is, hang on a second, the owner was walking on the path with the camel, and this camel stumbled because the riverbank gave way. And then the camel slipped off and knocked its head on the side of the rock by the riverbank, and then end of camel. Right. So we're saying actually the owner led it that way. But then you've got another problem. What's the problem, guys? It's very simple. If there wasn't another path to another route to take the camel, then all would agree he's innocent. Who would say this? Both Rabbi Meir and Rav Yehuda would agree that in this person, the person had no alternative route, and therefore a person is then not considered negligent. If he did have an alternative route, even Rabbi Yehuda would say that was an avoidable accident and would deem the same as Rabbi Meir that the person's responsible. So then that argument wouldn't reassert itself because there's no issue with Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda. Safe route, they both agree, owner is not responsible, both Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Meir. A better alternative route, both Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda would say that the person is liable. They wouldn't argue. Does that make sense? So it can't, this particular case can't mimic that first case of the Gemara, because in this case, both Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Meir are in agreement. So what are the circumstances of this case? This is what the Gemara challenges Rav Acha's explanation. If there was another route that he could have taken, he is certainly negligent for not doing so, and all would hold him liable for damage caused by the camel's fall, both Rabbi Meir and Rav Yehuda. And if there was no other route available, he is certainly the victim of an unavoidable accident because the riverbanks collapsed, and all would agree he is not liable. So having rejected the previous answer, the Gemara now suggests a different one. Rather, such a case is found where the owner stumbled and the camel stumbled over him. Okay, so what it's saying is the argument reasserts itself. Why? In this case, the hazard was created even indirectly by the stumbling of the owner. So in other words, the owner stumbles and he drags the camel down with him, and then the camel claps his head and dies. So Rabbi Meir would consider stumbling to be negligent and hold him liable for the damage, and the sages, including Rabbi Yehuda, would say that stumbling was not negligence and it's an unavoidable accident and he's not liable. So the argument reasserts itself even in the case of the camel, according to both disputes. This is Rashi's also explanation on it. Okay. And we understand about the ownerless part, how that applies to the camel. Guys, does everybody understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Just give a quick
I'll
1 minute summary.
Okay. So what I'm saying is that in the Bryce, it's got two parts. It's got the example of the pitcher, the damage of a pitcher during the fall, and as Arthur said, the reasonable time to clear up the mess. And after the fall, when you had sufficient time to clean it up, and the shards now have created a hazard, or the water's created a hazard. But it uses the example of the shards because you're declaring the shards ownerless. It's not important to you. And therefore, are you responsible for ownerless hazard in the public domain or not? But in the case of the camel, we could initially only see the original argument, which is when the camel dropped dead and you had sufficient time to move the body, in that particular case, and you declare the camel ownerless. Why? Nobody wants a smelly dead camel. The meat's not kosher. What are you going to do with it? Therefore, if it's ownerless, the argument with Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda reasserts itself. But what about the first part of the camel at the time of the fall? How is the owner responsible? So Rav Ashi said, listen, he's walking his camel, the bank of the river gave way, the camel dropped dead. Now the Gemara said, well, there's a problem with that. What's the problem? If you initially look at it, well, if it was the only path, Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda said the owner wasn't negligent. There's no other path. Didn't do anything wrong. Unavoidable accident. If there was a better path, there is negligence. Why? He should have taken the camel along the safer path. So then Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Meir agree that he's not liable. We have to have a case where they both disagree on the final point of negligence. So then the Gemara establishes and says, no, it's when the owner actually trips and then almost as he stumbles brings the camel down with him, and then that argument reasserts himself, is that was he negligent for not looking where he was going, the owner, or was he not negligent for tripping? Rabbi Meir said he is negligent for not looking, and Rabbi Yehuda said it's an unavoidable accident. Then the argument reasserts itself. So now we can see that the pitcher and the camel both discuss issues at the time of the fall, and as Arthur said, the correct allowing period for cleaning up the debris, which is considered at the time of the fall, and after the fall, the ownerless camel carcass where the owner just whistled away and left, versus the shards. Okay, so therefore this brisa works with the integrity of the Mishnah on both fronts, both the camel and the object. Okay, so we are on 29a2, and we're going to discuss next time about the buyer discussing the above dispute. Okay, guys, we are done. We're done 3 minutes early. Thank you.
Thanks, man. Have a great day.
Any questions?
Yeah, no, I actually have a question. Let's see if you can do it in 3 minutes. I apologize.
Okay.
I just wanted to, sorry, you were touching on the point, and I didn't actually quite grasp. I either didn't grasp it, or maybe there wasn't a proper answer. I'm not sure. So when the guy picks up the pitcher, and it breaks, and doesn't have enough time to clean it up, what's the difference between when he declares it like ownerless, or when he doesn't have enough time to pick it up, or where he does have enough time to pick it up and then it's negligent? Sorry, that's the difference. When he doesn't have enough time to clean it up, and when he does have enough time, what's the difference?
Okay, good question. Quickly answer. I've got 2 minutes. So at the time where he doesn't have enough time to clean it up, you can't argue with the guy there because, listen, he's doing his best to clean it up. So that argument is only about whether he was negligent for stumbling in the first place. Was it that he never looked where he was going, and he was like, while he's taking the pitch off his shoulder, he should have had more focus and just stood still while he took it off and being careful with what he did and where he walked, according to Rabbi Meir? Or is it according to Rabbi Yehuda that he slipped? It was just an unavoidable. So that's the only part of responsibility that you can hold it for during the time period that's reasonable to clean it up. It's
So,
the only part.
so what I'm trying to get at, what is the difference in accountability between the two? One where you didn't have enough time, and one where you did have enough time.
So that's two different arguments. The one where you did have enough time is an argument of whether or not your ownerless object, you're responsible for creating a hazard in the public domain. that is a separate argument to whether stumbling is considered negligence or not. And the time period at which you're cleaning the debris only has to do with the first argument, because you're not held responsible for trying to clean it up while somebody is slipping. That's not the part of the argument you're responsible for. The part of the argument you're responsible for is, did you look where you were going to cause the hazard in the first place at the time of the fall? So that's a separate argument. Were you negligent?
So then it doesn't really make a difference. So then it doesn't make a difference whether he has time or he doesn't have time.
It does make a difference, because they're two different arguments. So according to the time period at where it occurred, we will know if you're paskening, how you're paskening. It does make a difference. Of course it does.